Chapter 1. Transmigration. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ch1 Transmigration. 1. It was very late at night and the room was beautifully furnished. Su Yayas was feeling dizzy, so she couldn't figure out where she was. Last night, she had a class reunion. One of them who joined had not seen each other for a few years. After the meal, they decided to go to a KTV to continue. Their old class president gathered everyone to play a game, but Su Yaya was very unlucky last night and lost several rounds. As a result, she had to drink 5 or 6 glasses of wine as a penalty. She became drunk after drinking a few glasses of wine. Her head was muddled and everything became blurry, so she couldn't make out the faces of people clearly. In the end, she dizzily laid and slept on the sofa in the KTV room. While she was in a daze, she felt as if her body had been overturned, pressed down multiple times. It seemed like her whole person was rolled over by a road roller, and the bones in her body were about to fall apart. Su Yaya opened her mouth like a fish that was dying of thirst. She let out a weak cry for help from her dried and scorching hot throat. A white ray of light suddenly flashed in her head, but she didn't understand what was going on. She also didn't know how long she had slept for. The gurgling sound of water running made Su Yaya annoyed as she turned over to the other side of the bed. She can't help but become irritated. Which loathsome person would run the water so loudly this early in the morning? Disturbing someone's dream was immoral. The soundproofing quality of this rental room was too lacking to where she could even hear the water running from the next room over. Every day in the middle of the night, she would often hear the sound from next door when that particular neighbor watched programs that weren't suitable for children. Unable to stand it any longer, Su Yaya decided that she must quickly look for a new place to live. But it would cost her a lot of money for her to move to a new place, and she was very poor. Su Yaya was very irritated by this, so she wrapped her quilt around her and rolled around a few times on her bed. At this time, the sound of running water finally stopped. She let out a breath of air and flipped over on the bed, planning to continue to sleep. Just at this moment, her chaotic brain seemed to finally react and realize that something was off. Su Yaya thought for a moment. Although she had rolled on the bed a few times, she still had not fallen off. But in her memory, she clearly remembered that her bed was never large enough for something like that. She swiftly opened her eyes and found herself in an unfamiliar yet luxurious room. The spacious room was finely decorated and the furnishings in it were very fashionable. The size of this room was more than double the size of her 20 square meter room, and the furniture here were all high-class in quality. Even the Danish Carl Hansen Sun curved leather sofa with a single recliner in the corner of the room was worth tens of thousands. Su Yaya was stunned by everything in front of her. Was she dreaming? Su Yaya foolishly gazed at everything in front of her, without even noticing that the quilt that was wrapped around her began to slide off her body. Chen Xiuqi had a white towel wrapped around his waist when he walked out of the bathroom. As soon as he looked up, he saw Su Yaya sitting on the bed with a blank expression on her face. On top of her head, 2 stray strands of hair playfully stuck up and her eyes were wide open like a pair of big deer-like eyes. Her rosy cherry-like lips were slightly apart, which was extremely attractive and alluring. She appeared innocent, charming, and sexy all at the same time, just like a beautiful blooming flower. But she had a questioning expression on her face, as if to ask, who am I and what am I doing here? She was nibbling her lower lip, appearing foolish yet cute. Chapter 2. Transmigration. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Transmigration. 2. Chen Xiuqi looked at her enticing yet clueless appearance. It was as if he was hit by an electric current when he gazed at her. He could only feel his heart suddenly pounding, his throat tightening, and his Adam's apple bobbing up and down. Chen Xiuqi wasn't the type of person who would deny himself what he wanted. The corners of his mouth curved into a slight smile and he took large strides toward Su Yaya, who was still immersed in her confusion. Su Yaya was still in a state of shock. No matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't understand how she would end up here. She had only attended a class reunion, got drunk, and dizzily fell asleep. Yet how did she end up in an unfamiliar room with such a big bed when she opened her eyes? At this moment, her brain had crashed and wasn't able to properly process all this information. Meanwhile, a dangerous human cheetah was slowly approaching the foolish little rabbit. Oh! The human cheetah, Chen Xiuqi, walked towards her. He reached out and wrapped an arm around her neck, then he lowered his head and kissed her lips. Su Yaya's head suddenly felt dizzy, and many memories that didn't belong to her began to flow into her mind like a tidal wave. The enormous amount of information that flooded her mind began to drown her like a violent storm. She wasn't able to endure onslaught of memories, and her brain let out a buzzing noise and she fainted as soon as she closed her eyes. By the time she regained consciousness, only Su Yaya was left in the room. The human cheetah Chen Xiuqi was no longer here. A breeze blew in from the wide, transparent French window and the sea-blue curtains gently swayed. Su Yaya turned over on the bed as she hugged the quilt and began to sort out the extra memories in her brain that didn't belong to her. Thus, she gradually began to understand what this was all about. It turns out that after she had drunk heavily and passed out on the KTV room sofa, Su Yaya had somehow transmigrated to a melodrama novel called The President's Lovable Sweet Little Wife. This melodrama novel about a certain CEO was a story she had read the night before she had passed out from drinking. At that time, she was lying on her bed as she casually swiped through Xinjiang Literature City app. Her finger slipped and accidentally clicked on a book. She turned to look at the title, which read The President's Lovable Sweet Little Wife. At that time, she had chuckled and thought, why would the author use such a dumb name? When she scrolled down, she said that there was a supporting character with the same name as hers, Su Yaya. She turned out to be a malicious villain and a cannon fodder. At that time, Su Yaya was driven by a strange curiosity when she opened the novel, The President's Lovable Sweet Little Wife, and began reading it. In the book, Su Yaya was the ex-wife of the overbearing president male lead, Chen Xiuqi. She looked about 70% similar to the female lead, An Yutong. In order to pursue her musical dream, An Yutong went abroad to study. The overbearing president had painstakingly chased after his white moonlight female lead, An Yutong. He was heartbroken when she left, but he just happened to meet Su Yaya, who was a popular female on the 180 network. In order to find a substitute to fill up the emptiness in his heart, he crazily pursued after Su Yaya. How could the little white rabbit that had just graduated from college resist the overbearing President Chen's temptation? Su Yaya soon fell into the beautiful yet poisonous snare of love that Chen Xiuqi had weaved for her. At this time, Chen Xiuqi's grandfather was seriously ill and made a will, stating that Chen Xiuqi, who was 30 years old, must marry before he can inherit his tens of billions of inheritance. In order to inherit the inheritance, Chen Xiuqi naturally asked Su Yaya to sign marriage contract and marry him. Su Yaya was deeply immersed in his gentle doting at that time, so there was no way she would have rejected him. She only wanted to marry him, with or without a contract. Chapter 3. Transmigration 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ch3 Transmigration 3. Su Yaya was very happy at the prospect of marrying him, so she nodded and agreed to all the conditions he had proposed. In accordance to his request, she signed the marriage contract, the prenuptial agreement, and other documents. Because Grandpa Chen was still sick, the two people didn't have a wedding reception. They issued their marriage certificate first, so Chen Xiuqi was able to successfully inherit his tens of $billions of inheritance. Chen Xiuqi, who had inherited such wealth, wasn't a harsh person. In the beginning, he treated his wife very well because she had helped him. As long as Su Yaya's request wasn't too much, he would always try his best to satisfy her. If she asked for money, he would give her money. If she asked for a car, he would give her a car. If she asked for a house, he would give her a house. If she asked for jewelries, he would willingly gift her jewelries. When he goes abroad for business, he would sometimes bring her along. Su Yaya originally thought that this happy, sweet, and rich life would last forever, but the turning point of the plot came. 2 years later, Chen Xiuqi's first love and white moonlight ***, and Yutong returned. She had suffered hardship abroad, so the moment and Yutong saw Chen Xiuqi, she held him and cried bitterly. She told him how difficult it was for her to make a living outside, and Chen Xiuqi naturally felt very distressed for her. He busily arranged many things for her, hoping that she will live a better life after returning. **T/N, White Moonlight, Chinese idiom for first love. Chen Xiuqi's care for An Yutong at that time was merely that of friends, so he wasn't overstepping the bounds of what was proper. Su Yaya couldn't sit still because she felt that her position was in imminent danger now that An Yutong returned. She didn't want to lose her position as Mrs. Chen and her rich life, so she turned evil. Su Yaya constantly created trouble for the female and male lead, putting them at odds with each other. Perhaps the female and male lead were truly attracted to each other, because no matter how serious or deep the misunderstanding and problem was, the two people would eventually resolve these issues and their feelings for each other would deepen. Su Yaya became even more anxious when she saw that she couldn't separate the female and male lead by creating trouble and misunderstandings between them. As a result, she had someone kidnap An Yutong. This time, she had poked the hornet's nest. Chen Xiuqi safely rescued An Yutong from the kidnappers and sent someone to investigate who it was that had hired those kidnappers to kidnap An Yutong. After discovering that it was Su Yaya who had paid the kidnappers, he couldn't tolerate her any longer. Chen Xiuqi was so angry that he immediately proposed a divorce with Su Yaya. Chen Xiuqi took the divorce papers for her to sign it, but Su Yaya wasn't willing. She made a terrible scene, crying and threatening him with suicide. How could Chen Xiuqi be someone who was willing to be threatened by her? Not only did he force her to sign the divorce papers, he also used all the means necessary to cut off all her paths, leaving her not far from death. In fact, if Su Yaya had not turned evil when the female lead returned, she could have taken the initiative to divorce Chen Xiuqi. According to the original marriage contract, she would have gotten $10 million of alimony. Thinking of this, the current Su Yaya wanted to scold the former host of this body for being so foolish. Why would you try to create misunderstanding between the male and female lead? Isn't it great to get out of here after getting $10 million? If it was her, she would immediately sign the divorce papers and take off with her $10 million. She would go back to the countryside to buy a small courtyard and to farm. Upon opening her farmhouse, she will be feeding chickens, ducks, and fishes while planting some flowers and other plants on the side. Su Yaya will pass her days joyously with such a simple life. Su Yaya can't help but sit up while holding the quilt at this thought. When Chen Xiuqi opened the door to the room, he saw Su Yaya sitting on the bed with a foolishly happy expression on her face. Chapter 4. Platinum Card 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ch4 Platinum Card 1. Chen Xiuqi stared at the chuckling Su Yaya and thought. She's smiling so foolishly happy. What made her so happy? Su Yaya was wholeheartedly holding her quilt on the bed while thinking about the 10 million alimony. Once she gets a hold of it, it will be as if money were raining down from the sky, enough to fill her small bed to the brim with money. She will be able to happily sleep and roll on this bed of money every day. The silly and happy little rabbit failed to notice the human cheetah that had been staring at her for a long time by the door. She was completely immersed in her own beautiful fantasy. Who knows whether or not Chen Xiuqi was influenced by Su Yaya's silly appearance, but the corner of his mouth soon curved into a smile and his mood suddenly became better. He walked over with large strides and reached out to rub Su Yaya's disheveled hair. The man's voice was deep, beautiful, mellow, and rich like the cello. What are you thinking about that's making you so happy? Let me hear about it, HM. 10 million. Oh. Su Yaya looked up and finally noticed Chen Xiuqi. She hurriedly covered her mouth with her hand and stared at him with her sparkling wide eyes. but deep down, Su Yaya was secretly rejoicing that she had reacted promptly, and didn't blurt out her true inner thoughts. How will Chen Xiuqi react if he finds out that she saw him as a walking 10 million? Ah, she doesn't dare to think about it. Well. Chen Xiuqi's deep gaze swept across her face a few times, and saw how her eyes sparkled with light as she stared at him with worship and admiration. Of course Su Yaya would look at him with eyes full of worship and admiration because to her, he was worth $10 million. Every time she looked at his handsome face, she would be reminded of this. He was the automated ATM machine that will make her rich in the future and reach the peak of her life. Su Yaya seemed to be unable to take off her bright and sparkling big eyes off him. This greatly satisfied Chen Xiuqi's ego. Her cheeks were rosy and soft, and her skin was delicate and smooth. It seemed like water could be squeezed out of her cheeks with just a light pinch. At this thought, Chen Xiuqi did just that. He reached out and gently pinched Su Yaya's cheek. Her skin was satiny soft and glossy, and very comfortable to the touch. After pinching her once, Chen Xiuqi wanted to pinch her again. "Hurts," she weakly mumbled. Upon being pinched twice by Chen Xiuqi on the cheeks, she looked at him pitifully with her bright eyes. Her little rabbit-like gaze caused the man's heart to inexplicably soften, so he quickly let go of her cheeks and withdrew his hand. Chen Xiuqi coughed and sternly said, "I need to go to the company in a little while, so obediently stay at home. If you're bored, you head out and go shopping." Su Yaya nodded her head and obediently replied, "Oh, okay." She appeared lovable and soft, obedient yet clever like a silk flower, lightly wrapping around him, stirring his heart. He took out a wallet from his pocket and took up a card from the wallet. Chen Xiuqi handed her the card and said, "Take it." Her eyes fell on the platinum card in front of her and blinked her eyes in surprise. Su Yaya's heart began to pound and she looked up at Chen Xiuqi with excitement and nervousness. She pointed a finger at her nose and said, "Is this card for me?" How could her silly appearance look so cute? His heart was about to melt. The corners of Chen Xiuqi's mouth curved upwards and handed her the card again. He whispered, "Use it to spend." Wow! She was rich. Su Yaya was so happy that she almost bounced up. She was a poor person before she transmigrated into the novel in her sleep and became rich. Now, she even have a handsome and rich overbearing president husband giving her his card. He straightforwardly said, "Take it and spend as much as you want." Chapter 5. Platinum Card 2. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Ch5 Platinum Card 2. Chen Xiuqi straightforwardly said, "Take it and spend as much as you want." Ha ha ha. She was happy to death. She was so happy that she was about to turn crazy. Su Yaya took the card with both hands sincerely with a brilliant smile on her beautiful face. She said in a sweet and lovable tone, "Thank you husband, moi," kissing sound. Although the original owner of the body was married to Chen Xiuqi, she and Chen Xiuqi were just strangers. Su Yaya truly admired her ability to adapt to any situation. She had obviously just transmigrated and had merely 10 minutes of interaction with Chen Xiuqi. Of course, the deep physical interaction that occurred last night didn't count since at that time, she had fainted and couldn't experience it herself. Yet at this moment, the fact that she was able to calmly address Chen Xiuqi as her husband and kiss him, was quite impressive. Who told Chen Xiuqi to be so handsome, rich, and generous? She loved him to death. When faced with the immense temptation of money, she can abandon all morals and reservations. These things don't exist for the poor. What's the use of arrogance and an unyielding character for a poor person? Some of them had been persistently struggling just to barely survive. For a person like her who was scared of being poor, don't even talk about calling Chen Xiuqi husband, she was even willing to call him sugar daddy since he gave her a platinum card and told her to use it as much as she wants. However, her reaction made Chen Xiuqi had different thoughts about her character. He thought of her as someone different from those other women who are greedy for his money. She appeared very happy with just a card, it seemed like she was going to be very easy to raise. It seemed like his choice to marry and sign a marriage contract with her was correct. Since she had helped him so much by helping him successfully inherit his grandfather's inheritance, he will do his best to treat her right in the future. As long as her requests weren't too demanding, he will satisfy all her requests. Okay, I will go to the company. Chinchochi smiled and rubbed her head again. Her hair was very soft and felt good to touch, making him unable to bear to part with her. Since her sugar daddy had given her a platinum card, shouldn't she serve him well? Even if she had to pretend, she should make sure her acting skills were on par. Otherwise, he will feel that her service wasn't enough. Therefore, Su Yaya's face revealed the most perfect smile as she spoke with a sweet and soft voice, "Husband, you have to pay attention to your safety when you drive to work. Work hard and come back early, I will make you a delicious meal." Chinchochi swept his deep gaze across her face and her slender and fair fingers. He had known her for a long time, but he had never seen her cook. Was the food she made edible? "I'm going to a little busy today, so I don't know when I will be coming back. I will call you after I finish work." Before he made sure that her cooking was edible, he didn't want to make things difficult for his stomach. Seeing how happy she was and that she was taking the initiative, he didn't want to hurt her feelings, so he subconsciously used the excuse that he was busy with work. Sure enough, after hearing what he had said, the light in Su Yaya's eyes dimmed a little. "That's all right, be careful on the road." She stared at him and waved goodbye. She appeared reluctant to part with him, just like a small little kitten. Chinchochi's heart slightly stirred. If the company really didn't have something waiting for him to deal with, he was willing to stay with her. She was his woman, so it was acceptable for him to occasionally coax her, as long as she wasn't being too unreasonable. Chapter 6. Platinum Card 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ch6 Platinum Card 3. I'm leaving. Chinchochi rubbed her head for one last time before he turned around and headed for the door. He walked out of the room. The moment Chinchochi turned around to close the door, he inadvertently glanced at Su Yaya and saw her sitting still on the bed while holding her quilt. Her big, watery eyes were staring at him without blinking. Chinchochi lowered his head and closed the door, his mouth curved up into a faint smile. Su Yaya waited for Chinchochi's footsteps to gradually drift away. Now alone in this room, she held up the platinum card that Chinchochi had just given her. She chuckled like a crazy little mouse and incessantly rolled around the bed. Oh my God! She would have never imagined that she would become a rich person after transmigrating into a novel after falling asleep. Noel she felt extremely happy and refreshed. Su Yaya couldn't stop laughing as she rolled about on the mattress, and she had even kissed the platinum card multiple times. This woman appeared more enthusiastic than she did before when she was facing Chinchochi. Su Yaya finally stopped laughing and rolling about when she heard the sound of the engine of the car starting from below. According to the current plot, the novel had not yet entered the main storyline. Right now, the original owner of the body and Chinchochi had only been married for 5 days, so they were still at the sweet and loving phase of their marriage. Regardless of why Chinchochi had pursued the original owner of the body, or the purpose he had in mind when he married the original host, Chinchochi seemed to like her and was willing to coax and dote on her based on the current situation. Therefore, Su Yaya, who was a counterfeit that had transmigrated here, planned to win Chinchochi's favor by fawning over him. She will serve Chinchochi and do her best to have a good relationship with him in order to leave behind a good impression of herself. She won't oppose the female lead, so when they divorce in the future, he will remember her goodness and give her more alimony. Thinking about this, a scene from the novel suddenly flashed in Su Yaya's mind. She quickly reached out and grabbed the robe that was at the corner of the bed. After putting on the robe, she quickly walked to the French window and pulled aside the sea blue curtains. Su Yaya looked down, just in time to see Chinchochi's car slowly driving out of the villa's gate. A bright idea suddenly dawned upon her. She quickly raised her hand and waved at the rearview mirror of the car. It didn't matter if Chen Xiuqi saw it or not, it was good enough as long as she did it. In fact, early this morning when she was sending Chen Xiuqi to work, she had suddenly remembered a novel she had read. In the story, the female lead had done this same thing, which firmly tugged at the male lead's heartstrings, thus leaving the male lead a favorable impression of her. Therefore, she hoped that she will be able to curry Chen Xiuqi's favor by doing this. He. She applauded at how quick-witted she was. Inside the car, chauffeur Zhong Shu saw Su Yaya standing by the window and waving goodbye at Chen Xiuqi from the rearview mirror. He didn't know what was wrong with himself today since he usually wasn't a talkative person, but he wanted to tell Chen Xiuqi about this. The chauffeur spoke up and said, "President Chen, young lady Su is waving goodbye at you from upstairs." Chen Xiuqi had been looking at the documents, but his fingers stopped flipping through the files when he heard Zhong Shu's words. He didn't even have to look to know that Su Yaya, this silly girl, was probably standing in front of the French window as she reluctantly looked at the departing car. He already had a smile on his face since he left the villa, but the smile deepened while he thought of her. Kitty Jill. More advanced chapters will be available next week in my Chapter 7. A Beauty. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ch7. A beauty. Once Chen Xiuqi's car had driven far away and could no longer be seen, Su Yaya let go of the curtains and walked back to her bed. When she saw the platinum card on the bed, Su Yaya picked it up with a sweet smile and kissed it again. She lied back on her bed leisurely and recalled the time when she was impoverished. At that time, she was busy working her ass off for the sake of her meager income. Whenever she made a mistake at her job, she was scolded by her team leader, and to add salt to the wound, she could barely earn enough to live paycheck by paycheck each month. At the end of every month, Su Yaya had to pay rent, water and electricity bills. She didn't dare to buy new clothes or expensive cosmetics because she had to save money. But no matter how much she tried to budget, there was still not much money left at the end of each year. Each day she lived was miserable. Sometimes, she would spend her free time reading romance novels while fantasizing that one day, a rich and handsome guy will descend from the sky and give her a gold card. He would tell her, "Spend as much as you want and swipe the card as many times as you wish." She always thought that if that had actually happened, she would surely jump for joy. And this fantasy was exactly how her current situation is playing out at the moment. Even the idiom, "to be over the moon," could not describe her how happy she is right now. Su Yaya, who had been lying in bed for a while, finally got up after she felt like she had stared at the platinum card long enough. She hummed a tune as she cheerfully bounced towards the bathroom. Su Yaya twirled into the room, locked the bathroom door, and walked to the sink. She could barely hold back her scream when she saw herself in the mirror. The reflection was too beautiful. She had never seen someone as beautiful this image in her entire life. What's more, the beautiful reflection in the mirror belonged to her. Below her dark, willow-dot-like eyebrows was a pair of big sparkling watery eyes. Her eyelashes were thick and long like a small curling fan. Whenever she blinked, it would tremble like a butterfly's wings. Su Yaya turned left and right to examine her face. She discovered from the reflection that her face was a perfect shape from her forehead to the tip of her nose. Her nose was straight and small, just the kind that she had always wanted. The nose Su Yaya had before was a little flat. Even though it wasn't ugly, it just didn't reach the beauty standards in her heart. However, she had always been a little regretful because she didn't have the courage to get a nose job. But now that she had transmigrated here, she had obtained the nose that she always had dreamed of. Her nose was natural, without any signs that she had surgery done on it in the past. She was exceptionally happy. Her happiness was similar to how a person would feel after their long-awaited dream had finally come true. Her rosy lips were like sakura petals, as if she had applied on a layer of lip gloss. With a small smile on her face, Su Yaya couldn't help but use her finger to trace her lips, her chin, and then all the way down to her slim and fair collarbone of her neck. The face of the person in the mirror was flushed peach pink and the corner of her eyes was radiating charm. It was obvious from her appearance that she had been fiercely loved by someone. There was also a hickey on the left side of her collarbone. Chen Xiuqi was especially fond of her collarbone, so he would always nip and bite there, leaving behind traces of love. The woman in the mirror was extremely beautiful and her whole body exuded charm. She appeared to be innocent, sexy, and charming all at the same time. Not to mention men being attracted to her, even she couldn't stop her heart from rapidly pounding and her face from flushing red when she saw her reflection. Chapter 8. Rely on Yourself. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ch8 Rely on Yourself. 1. Su Yaya filled the massage bathtub with hot water and took off her pajamas, revealing her perfect body. She lifted her straight, long, and skinny legs and stepped into the bathtub. Then, she lied down in a comfortable position. While she was bathing, Su Yaya immersed herself in the warm water and began enjoying the comfortable massage after she pushed the massage button. Su Yaya let out a soft sigh. It was very comfortable. It was no wonder that everyone wanted to live like rich people, they lived so comfortably. Su Yaya lied in the bathtub and took a warm and relaxing bath. A slight dizziness overcame her at this moment, and in her drowsy state, she seemed to hear a voice telling her, "Enjoy your comfortable life right now, since you'll have to rely on yourself in the future." She was startled awake when she heard this, but when she looked around, there was no one else in the bathroom. Was she just dreaming? When she recalled the words she had heard in her dream, she couldn't help but think deeply. Enjoy your comfortable life right now, since you'll have to rely on yourself in the future. She really wanted to enjoy this life. After all, who didn't want to enjoy a rich and relaxing life where there was someone who'll dote on them? She had almost completely sunk into this lifestyle and was unable to get out. But her rationality was telling her that this life was too unrealistic. Right now, she had transmigrated into the novel and had become Chen Xiuqi's wife. She was living a rich and relaxing lifestyle, but a dream will always end. One day, she might transmigrate back to her old life, so she can't indulge herself and become blinded by this glorious and wealthy life in front of her. It was hard to become frugal after becoming accustomed to luxury. She was afraid that she won't be able to adjust to her original lifestyle once she transmigrated back. Even if she didn't transmigrate back, she still couldn't continue to live this luxurious lifestyle. In the near future, the female lead, An Yutong, will return from abroad. An Yutong was Chen Xiuqi's destined wife. The female lead and the male lead was destined to be together. She was a cannon fodder that could only maintain her current lifestyle for 2 more years. After that, she will have to return back to her original lifestyle. In the original novel, the female supporting character, Su Yaya, had courted disaster by herself. She fell into her own traps and offended Chen Xiuqi in every way, and she ended up being detested by everyone just like a street rat. Since she already knew the ending in the novel, she can't do anything to offend Chen Xiuqi and An Yutong. She could only hope to change Su Yaya's ending in the novel and live until she was old. But since An Yutong had yet to return, and Chen Xiuqi was still nice to her, all she could do was to please him and serve him well so that she could leave a good impression behind. When An Yutong returns, she will take the initiative and hand over her position. She won't do anything that will harm the female lead and the male lead's relationship, and will stay as far away from them as possible. Yes, that's right. Su Yaya was more and more certain of her plan. After she finished bathing, Su Yaya stepped out of the bathtub and used a towel to wipe away the droplets of water on her body. Relying on the original character's memory, she opened the cabinet that contained all her skin care products, and was then greeted by the sight of various skin care products that filled up the space. There were skin care products for the body, for the face, skin care products in Chinese and in foreign languages. There were also brands that she had heard of, but never used, such as La Mer and Pola, and many others. L.C. TLN. La Mer and Pola are luxury skincare brands. The smallest bottle of La Mer, 0.5 ounces, cost around $100 and can go up to several thousands of dollars. Her current body was already born with such good skin, her complexion was smooth and soft, without any blemishes, just like a baby's skin. It seemed like with just a soft pinch, water will come out from her pores. In addition to the natural beauty that this body was born with, it was also maintained by using those expensive skincare products. Chapter 9. Rely on yourself. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ch9 Rely on yourself. 2. The financial status of this body's owner can only be regarded as normal. Her parents were ordinary company employees. However, they had spent a large portion of their salaries on their daughter, who in turn used this money to buy skincare products. Before she met Chinshochi, the original host would only eat once a day to save enough money to buy La Mer. After she met him, he was very generous towards her, so she could buy these products without holding back. The owner of this body had taken such extreme care to maintain this body by spending large amounts of money and effort. So even though Su Yaya had transmigrated over and took over the body, she still regarded this body as something that truly belonged to the original Su Yaya. Just like how she was taught since little that it was wrong to destroy other people's things, she can't just treat the body too casually. A beauty needed to have a beauty's conscientious attitude, so she needed to take good care of the body just like the owner did. Of course, Su Yaya also has her own selfish motive. She finally became as beautiful as she had always dreamed to be, so she needed to work hard to be worthy of this beauty. She needed to make her beauty more long-lasting, more fragrant, and more attractive. Su Yaya decided to take good care of her body according to the memory left behind by the original owner. She tried her best to imitate the owner's routine, only finishing up when she finally felt satisfied. After she completed her routine, Su Yaya opened the closet and chose a white dress. This was the latest dress from the Chanel brand, simple yet graceful. It seemed like the dress was tailor-made for her body when she put it on, as it perfectly outlined her exquisite curves. Su Yaya twirled in front of the mirror, and stared at her own reflection, unable to look away. After she finished dressing herself and admiring her appearance, she walked out the room and came down from the second floor. It appears that she was the only person in the house at this time. The household's maid, Lu Ma, had a son whose family welcomed a newborn son a few days ago. Lu Ma resigned from her position to help raise her newborn grandson a few days ago, but a replacement for a housemaid had yet to be hired. Su Yaya checked the refrigerator and couldn't find anything to eat. There was no one else at home to cook for her either. As a result, Su Yaya can only bring her purse and go out to look for food. Su Yaya knew how to drive, and the owner of the body also had a driver's license. She went to the underground garage and drove a white car towards the closest shopping mall. Chinshochi was having a meeting in the conference room. The marketing manager was reporting this month's marketing sales with vivid explanations. Chenluchi listened to his report without any expression on his face when he suddenly noticed the screen of his phone light up from the corners of his eyes. Yaya. Husband, I saw a dress that I like a lot, but it was a bit expensive. Dress image.jpg. Upon seeing the message, Chinshochi's heart began to pound at the thought of how obedient and clever she was earlier that morning. He picked up his phone and opened WeChat to check out the image she sent. The style of the dress was quite ordinary and he couldn't see what brand it was. This dress was different from the usual style of clothing she bought. Chinshochi didn't think much of it since he didn't lack money, so he responded with "Buy." After he sent the message, Chinshochi waited for Su Yaya's response. Earlier that morning, when he gave her the card, she smiled sweetly at him and said, "Husband, moi." Now that he agreed to buy the dress, she should have some appreciation, right? Chinshochi thought that Su Yaya would reply immediately upon seeing his straightforward response, but there was still no response at all even after 10-20 minutes. He couldn't help to check his WeChat a few times. Seeing that she still hadn't replied, his handsome face suddenly darkened. He pointed his finger at Su Yaya's profile picture and thought while gnashing his teeth, heartless little bastard, I gave you the card but you won't even reply with a simple thank you. I will sort you out when I return home later. Chapter 10. To buy or not to buy. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ch10 To buy or not to buy. 1. Su Yaya drove the car out of the villa towards the nearby shopping mall, which took her about 10 minutes. Upon arriving, she went into the underground parking lot and found an empty space to park her car. She stepped out of the vehicle with her purse and took an elevator up. The elevator stopped on the 3rd floor and opened its doors. Su Yaya walked out with her pair of high heels, but before she could even take 2 steps, a dress with flared sleeves caught her eye on the display's latest fashion. The color and style of this dress looked exactly the same as the dress that she saw in a shopping mall before her transmigration into this novel world. At that time, she took a fancy to the dress at first glance and had specially asked the shop assistant to take the dress off the display for her to try on. After trying it on, she found that it fit perfectly and suited her looks well. She really liked the dress. But at that time, she was embarrassingly short on money and the dress cost over half a month of salary for her. If she had bought the dress, it would have been difficult for her to pay her rent and food for that month. After thinking about it, she could only regretfully abandon the thought of buying the dress. Now that she saw the same dress, Su Yaya was moved. She really wanted to buy it. After all, she always carried this lingering regret for not being able to afford it at that time. When she returned to work shortly after that event, it was difficult for her to stay motivated in her job and she felt down for a long time. Her dream was both to find wealth and to buy the dress she adored for herself. Now, she wanted to satisfy her own wish. As Su Yaya walked into the store, the sales staff observed her from head to toe. Seeing that she wore a Chanel dress and necklace, along with a Chanel bag, the sales staff knew she was a wealthy person. Her eyes brightened and she revealed the sweetest smile she could to the customer, not forgetting to gently ask if she needed any help. I want to try that dress. Su Yaya pointed at the dress hanging on the display window. The sales staff nodded and promptly went to take the dress down. She led Su Yaya to the fitting room to try the dress on. Su Yaya brought the outfit into the fitting room and changed into it. The moment the sales staff saw her coming out of the fitting room, her eyes brightened even more. She complimented genuinely and said, "Miss, you're so beautiful in this dress." She had been a sales staff in this store for almost 3 years, so she had seen many customers before. Some were beautiful, others had average looks, some had a great figure, and there were others who lacked such figures. Yet, she had never seen a woman like Su Yaya who was both beautiful and had a great figure. There were people who were more beautiful than her but were lacking a good body shape. There were people with more slender figures than her but lacked her beauty. In short, this customer was the most perfect woman she had seen. She was good in all ways. Her skin was white as though it was glowing, it was moist and white, like a newly peeled egg. She exposed her beautiful and slender swan-like neck after wearing the dress. Her waist was skinny and exposed her figure just perfectly. Her appearance couldn't be described in words. Su Yaya looked at herself in the mirror and thought she was beautiful too. In the past, she wasn't beautiful, at most she was just pretty. When she stood beside someone who was actually beautiful, she became ordinary like a maid. Plus, she came from an ordinary family and her parents were just normal workers. There was only so much monthly income, so they had to be frugal in their spending. Even after she had a job, she had to be wise with her money, so she naturally became petty. So when she did have money in her hands, she didn't dare to spend it.